You are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I'm Jon Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 713 of Israel's genocidal war in Gaza. I will be breaking down another hand-delivered explosive through the turret of a Merkava tank in Jabalia. Later on in the show, we'll also touch on the West Bank and Yemen. But as always, let's take a look at the maps first here. We can see that the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs map now shows Gaza as a completely under complete expulsion orders. So you can see the purple runs from all the way through Gaza City. That announcement came this week. And we are now in, according to the Israeli military, day 3 of Operation Gideon's Chariots Part 2. The invasion formally began, according to the Israelis, on Tuesday. They announced it to CNN, not to their local media, which their local media was made a point about. And the defense minister, the Israeli defense minister, boasted that Gaza City was burning on the heels of 100 Israeli Air Force airstrikes in the first 12 hours after the announcement, which brought the number to over 1,000 airstrikes in just over a week in Gaza City alone, a tempo of operations that we have not seen in some time. And of course, that's just airstrikes. I say this every week, but those numbers are just airstrikes. They don't include naval shelling. They don't include artillery, tank shelling. They don't include their quadcopters that are carried out at a company level, taking hand grenades and dropping them from quadcopters onto tents and burning them. Doesn't include the M113 tank bombs, the robot bombs that are being sent in ahead of the armored vehicles. So that's just airstrikes. And of course, as Nora reported in the news, there's a communications blackout in Gaza, which is at least in part due to the fact that Israel has been dropping every tall tower that had that had connections on them. And so information is being spotty right now in the north. And there's no pretense of fighting here. The Israeli military is not saying they're fighting the resistance. In fact, they haven't even said that they've stepped out of their tanks yet. This is day 3 of the operation, and it's still, there's no way you could tell the difference in Gaza City between day 3 or 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. The Israelis have been killing 100 people a day. They're killing people in tent camps. They're killing people. They're targeting hospitals. They're targeting the roads that they've asked people to evacuate on. And the Israeli defense minister calls this, quote, fighting valiantly, which is really interesting statement from the defense minister, who is a Netanyahu toady and not a military person, but to say that this is brave fighting by the Israeli military, who are just raining down American explosives onto civilians, is very telling. So far, there's only 2 divisions of the planned 5 divisions that are supposed to be participating in the second battle of Gaza City. The Israeli military spokesperson says that they expect that there'll be several months of battle and then several more months of erasure in Gaza, as we have seen everywhere else that these fights have been, like Rafah, where they completely destroy the area as the military strategy, not fighting the resistance, but fighting against infrastructure, as they call it. But we know that that just means civilian homes. We could take a look at the number 2 here with the zoom in on the north and just see what we're talking about here. See complete evacuations orders all over the north, 82% in shoot to kill zones. This is from the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. They put these maps out once a week, and they come with a bunch of stats, and I'll read you some of those that were in this week's. Reported damage: 78% of all structures are destroyed or damaged. That's as of mid-July, so that's 2 months dated. 90% of the commercial of the commerce and industry segments of the economy are completely destroyed. 81% of the roads are destroyed. 100% of the population is in phase 5 of the IPC famine. Shelters, 436,000 housing units damaged or destroyed. That's 92% of the Gaza Strip's housing units have been destroyed. And the government media office said in just the last month, since the middle of August, there's been 1,600 residential buildings, 13,000 tents, and the displacement of hundreds of thousands of more. We can look at the number 3 is the Israeli evacuation notice, the top that says, we are publishing the areas that people can go to. This is the official notice. There was local notices delivered all over, dropped from quadcopters in localized areas, but this is the overall notice that the Israeli military gave. It's the second part says the areas that people can go to are Nusrat, Barej, Maghazi, Deir al-Bala, and Western Khan Yunis. There was strikes in Nusrat yesterday. So they're targeting areas they're telling people to leave to. At the bottom, it says the IDF is determined to resolve the battle against Hamas and will act with great force, proceed immediately to the listed areas. And so as they did that, Nora reported in the newscast, they hit cars on the road evacuating. So these evacuation notices are no more useful than they were at any other point in the war. We still have the Israeli military establishment fighting with the political establishment about the military not wanting to fight in Gaza City, not thinking they can defeat Qassam in Gaza City, and the fact that there's no talk anymore about the captives, the Israeli soldiers who are left. All of the captives left are Israeli soldiers. And there was a fight between the chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, and Ron Dermer, who's Netanyahu's point man on the file, before going to the starting Operation Gideon's Chariots 2 the other day. Zamir said, why isn't the negotiating team traveling around the world to force a deal? Why don't we? And he says to the Mossad chief, why are you sitting here in the room? Go and get a deal. Of course, ignoring the fact that Israel just a few days earlier had bombed the negotiators and attempted to kill all of the negotiators in Qatar, as we just heard from Dr. Sami Al-Arian. If you didn't catch that interview, you should check it out. Looking at number 4, we can see the migration map. This map was actually updated just a few minutes ago while we were on air. The map we're looking at here shows 191,200 people displaced. We're looking at a map of the north of the Gaza Strip, and you can see a bunch of lines, and each of those lines represents a community that has been evacuated. Each of those lines that you're seeing represents thousands of people driven out and displaced. The numbers today were updated to 246,800. And again, this is the migration cluster. This is a group of NGOs and UNRWA and the International Office for Migration. The Norwegian and Danish refugee councils are in on this site cluster as well. But this is a catastrophe. We talked about it last week, but people don't have what they had the first time the catastrophic evacuation of Gaza City happened. There's no currency in Gaza. There's no fuel. There's no food. There's no places on the way down to the south for food or fuel or water. And to have this expulsion happening at this point right now is a catastrophe in every way. If we look at the next map, you can see that this is what the roads look like. This map was released this week, and you can see that what you're looking at here is the road grid in particularly this is northern Gaza and central Gaza. The red areas are completely destroyed. So you can see on the left side of that map that you have a block of all red. So it's just the roads are completely destroyed in that area. Gaza City is above that red block. So everyone going from Gaza City is traveling on destroyed roads. This is from UNOSAT, the United Nations satellite network. And the orange is mostly destroyed and the yellow is partially destroyed. And you can see all the way down that is the case. And this has been going on this destruction of the roads has made it very difficult for people to get down south. It's created massive traffic jams. And again, there's a lack of cars. People have lost their vehicles. They've lost everything. And they're on the road right now. 80% of the roads have been destroyed. That's data from July. So you know that there's been 2 months of erasure since then. And the government media office pointed out that the area that people are supposed to go to, Mawasi, that the Mawasi area, falsely promoted by Israel as a humanitarian safe zone, now shelters roughly 800,000 people, but has been struck by over 109 air raids, leaving more than 2,000 dead in successive massacres carried out by Israeli forces inside Mawasi itself. Mawasi lacks all basic necessities: no hospitals, no infrastructure, no roads, no water, no food, no shelter, no electricity, no education, making life there nearly impossible. The areas marked on the Israeli maps as shelter zones now amount to only 12% of Gaza's territory, upon which people are supposed to be, the 2 million people in Gaza are supposed to be crammed into concentration camps. So that was the government ministry in Gaza sending that statement out. But let's take a look at the resistance. Let's start in northern Gaza. We could see, oh, we have a zoom in on that map. Sorry, I meant to flip this map. You can see here more clearly the red destroyed roads make it impossible to go from the mostly destroyed yellow roads down to the south. So that's the zoom in of that same map. And you can see why getting out, even for people who want to leave, is very difficult. But that people who are leaving right now are representing less than 1/3 of the population in Gaza City. And many people have said that they are not leaving Gaza, despite what the Israelis have been doing to try to get them to leave. So let's take a look now at that map from the north. Just to point out that these maps and evacuation notices that Israel gives have no legal authority, but the previous chief of staff, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿, the chief of the Israeli military who oversaw the first 17 months of the genocide, he gave a speech in southern Israel the other day in the Gaza envelope that was reported on by 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿 and then picked up and translated by The Guardian, where 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿 took credit for more than 200,000 casualties in Gaza. He called it 10% of the Gaza population. And he said that not once was a military operation inhibited by legal advice. Quote, "Not once has anyone restricted me, not once." 𝐓𝐡𝐞 told 𝐄𝐿 said that, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐿, the newspaper, said that 𝐄𝐿 told the audience that the main importance of Israel's military lawyers was to convince the outside world of the legality of Israel's actions, the actions of the IDF. 𝐄𝐿 says, quote, "They are legal advisors who say, we will know how to defend this legally to the world. It is very important for the state of Israel," quote unquote. So it's a facade that Israel believes gets them out of war crimes trials, which, if there is justice, will not happen. Before we go to the first film, I just want to set up this operation in Jabalia because we talked about this last week. We had 2 field reports of it. And before I break down this film, I just wanted to remind you of those elements of it. This was an attack on the 401st Armored Brigade, who has a history in Jabalia. In Jabalia, the Jabalia Battalion had killed the commander of the 401st Armored Brigade about a year ago, 3 months into his tour in Jabalia. He was killed by the resistance. And the IDF investigation into this operation that we're going to watch it draws on a few key details. The first one is that the operation was effectively a breaching operation. The Qassam Brigade's fighters advanced into a defensive position that the Israeli military had set up, an outpost that tanks were guarding. The operation was executed at 6 a.m. in the morning, 1 hour after the tanks had moved into position from their morning routine in what the IDF calls, quote, dawn readiness, with commanders in situational assessments and forces on the highest alert. This is the context of the operation where at least 3 of the 4-man 𝐓𝐡𝐞 squad advanced into the Israeli defensive position and deposited a guerrilla action device through the open hatch of the Merkava tank turret. And the last thing that Army Radio points out is that the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 attack on the bunker and the approach to the tank were possible despite this dawn readiness, which is supposed to be the time of maximum alertness and vigilance. Security officials say this is exactly the scenario the forces train and prepare for: an attack on a bunker in by a guerrilla formation. And despite all of this high readiness and previous attacks, the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighters managed to carry out a successful attack. That's what Army Radio noted, that despite their best efforts, 𝐓𝐡𝐞 still defeated them in this operation, and this video was released this week. So let's take a look at it here. We're seeing the fighters here preparing the BARC guerrilla action device. This is the new guerrilla action device that we've seen them manufacturing. It's a little difficult to see. The camera work on this one isn't what we are used to from 𝐓𝐡𝐞, but we see here 3 fighters preparing this operation, and they are going to, again, breach an Israeli defensive position. There hasn't been fighting in Gaza. The Israelis are in behind defensive positions. There we see the tank that is the target. We can see how close the fighters are able to get up to that tank. And now we're going to watch here. You can see the fighter crossing that open space, and he's literally going to climb up on top of this tank. You can see him there in shadow. We'll show you later a closer look at that, but you can see him there. He takes the BARC. He's right on top. There he takes a shot, and the Israeli soldiers inside of the base fire on him. But you can see with the cameraman as well that both were able to dismount from the tank and run, and that is the detonation of the BARC, the Lightning guerrilla action device. It killed the 4 soldiers inside instantly. Again, you could see in that angle the shot that may have hit the 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighter. There was one report in 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐿 that said that a 𝐓𝐡𝐞 fighter was killed, but that doesn't match with the Israeli investigation that said no fighters were killed, and that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 report was the only one that said someone died. The IDF investigation said that they looked through the area and did a sweep and found nobody. This last frame here says, he who repeats the same mistakes falls into the same traps, basically. It doesn't have a direct translation, but it's essentially referring to the fact that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 keeps catching these guys with their hatches open. Maybe we can take one more look at it now that we know what we're looking at, because it's a pretty impressive operation to breach the Israeli position at their highest readiness. So it's not a sneak attack in the sense it's a frontal attack, and the resistance still 23 months into the war are able to execute this. You can see the 3 fighters, and there's 2 cameramen that we're going to see here. So this is the shot of the tank. You can see it from the side angle there of the tank, and you can see the commander. At one point, the commander's head is popped out of the hatch, and we have seen that many times. We've seen snipers fire on them with their riding outside the hatch. We've seen Yasin strikes with the soldiers outside the hatch. Again, you can see the shadow of the fighter getting up here, and you're going to see the ping of a soldier firing on him there. But you see him jump down. He's able to jump down and run away. So are the other cameramen are able to run away. So I believe that we had everybody return to their base safely here. The Israeli military said that there was a trail of blood, presumably from the fighters, and then the Israelis panicked and they all started firing at each other, and an Israeli soldier was wounded by friendly fire in that panic. So you can see those are a pretty significant IED that they have manufactured in the war. This IED did not exist before the war. There you're seeing the ammo cook off in the tank. The IDF said the 4 soldiers were killed immediately. If we take a look at number 9, you can see the guerrilla action device there. We've been tracking these. This is now half a dozen of these we've seen from southern Gaza all the way up to the north in Jabalia here. And the next slide, you can see him climbing up on the tank with a handy little circle that we've put on there so that you can see that he's able to get up on the hatch. And this is the first operation of an IED deposited inside a tank turret hatch. We've seen previously them doing it to Namr troop carriers. So that is the operation that was from earlier this month in Jabalia. If we take a look at number 11, we can see what was predicted. I alerted people to the fact that there would probably not be a lot of on-the-ground fighting from the end of Gideon's Chariots number 1 to the beginning of the Gaza City invasion, and that has been true. But we still see a number of operations. We see standoff fire, artillery fire. This is Saraya's mortar unit from the Central Brigade firing on Tel al-Montar in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜𝐿 on the eastern edge of 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜. And you're going to see after he launches these 60 millimeter mortars that they're landing these. You can see them here. You can see the excavator, the Israeli position. They're landing all of these mortars all in and around their targets. So whenever we do get to see where they land, we're always seeing them be very close with them. And that makes sense after 2 years of these artillery units. These are dedicated units. This is as I said, this is from the Central Brigade firing on an IDF position in 𝐄𝐥𝐿𝐜. And just as we were going on the air, the Israeli military admitted to an operation in Rafah in the southern Gaza Strip, what they suspect was a tunnel operation, and was part of 3 operations in Rafah just today against these units. So they said at Rafah, the Rafah Brigade was defeated. It's been ethnically cleansed, but there's fighters still accessing via tunnel and hitting the Israelis. 4 soldiers were killed. 3 more were wounded in their Humvee in an IED attack. And this was 1 kilometer from the Philadelphia corridor, which is on the border with Egypt. So the resistance hasn't claimed that operation yet. We'll see who executed that operation, but in an area that the Israelis believe that they had full control over. They were sending cadets into that area. They've sent media in soft-skin vehicles into that area, but the resistance caught them that time. If we look at number 12, we also have Israel Quds carrying out rocket operations. And this rocket operation was also from the northern central camps just south of Gaza City. You can see them calibrating there using wooden makeshift launchers. And then those Qassam rockets there, they either look brand new or someone painted them. If they're building rockets during the war, we're definitely going to see it. We've been looking for that throughout this. You can see they're pretty good shape, those rockets. And the fighter here is going to write Israel Quds on the rocket before launching it. The Israelis said that one of these rockets were intercepted. The other one was not intercepted. And these are the kind of operations that we have seen this week. There was 7 mortar and rocket operations this week, but there was also a couple Yassins, one Yassin operation versus a tank and one versus an APC in Khan Yunis along the 2 corridors in Khan Yunis. There was 2 IEDs versus tanks in Jabalia, and an IED hit a tank in Sheikh Radwan in Gaza City. And then today, just as we're going on air, we're hearing about this operation in Rafah that hit a Humvee. So operations are still going on, but once the battle in Gaza City begins, which it has not yet, and the Israelis are saying that this is a gradual operation, so they're going to take their time with this, but it seems that we have on deck here a many months operation, several months of clearing. And if we look at the other operations of much smaller areas, and area like Khan Yunis, which is separated and is easier for the Israeli military to hold, that operation was 5 months. So you could assume based on that what we are looking at in Gaza City. So we will keep following that each week. Just a little check-in on the West Bank here. Nora talked about this operation as well, but there was an IED operation In Tulkarm, 2 soldiers were wounded in their Panther armored personnel carrier last week, and medevac helicopters had to take them out. That is one of 260 IED operations against Israeli troops since October 2023, according to the Palestine Information Center. And if we look at number 13 here, you can see that 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜, that's the Panther. That's a Panther vehicle in flames there. And that's Abu Shuja, who was the commander of the Tulkarm Brigade. And it says, playing off his name, which means the brave, it says, the brave will remain a horror that haunts you, or a horror that chases you. And 𝐓𝐡𝐞 𝐄𝐥𝐞𝐜 put that video out there. Also, Nora reported on the after effect of that, which was a mass arrest in Tulkarm that looked... well, the Israelis wanted you to watch it because they arrested 1,000 people and made them all walk through town with their hands on each other's shoulders in a parade, which is a war crime. And that took the number, it was 1,000 arrested in less than a day. And as Nora also pointed out, there's been 19,000 arrests in the West Bank. Since the war started, there's 11,000 Palestinians in Israeli prison service behind bars right now in the West Bank. That doubles the number from before the war, and it does not include anyone arrested in Gaza. And we know the number, we don't know the number in Gaza, but we know that it's many thousands have been arrested in Gaza. Almost uniformly civilians taken from shelters. Let's take a quick look at Yemen, where actually when we were just on air as well, a drone struck Eilat. If we look at number 14, Abdelmalek al-Houthi spoke today and talked about there have been 24 missile and drone operations. You can see there on the bottom, that is the Jaffa drone. And the ballistic missile that you see there is the Palestine 2 ballistic missile that now has just recently added a cluster munition warhead, where you can see the 𝐓𝐴 at the top there. The re-entry vehicle is a cluster munition, and that's the Jaffa drone at the bottom of there. So 24 missile and drone operations in the past week, Abdelmalek al-Houthi said, and that didn't count the 2 that just happened while we were on air. That takes the number to 67 in the past 3 weeks. There's been steady attacks, drone attacks in particular, on the Israelis. If we look at number 15, we got footage from the Israelis. There you can see the Jaffa drone. That's a good shot of the Jaffa drone. It had penetrated Israeli airspace, and the Israelis shot it down. But we know it hit Ramon International Airport in Eilat last week. But that was just a good shot of the Jaffa drone there, you can see. And then number 16 is just to give you a look at that drone. Again, that this drone was unveiled by the Yemeni Armed Forces on the 23rd of July, 2024. So last summer, it has 14 hours of endurance, 50-kilogram warhead, as we saw when it hit Ramon Airport, and 6-meter wingspan, 2,500-kilometer range, which puts most of central Israel well within target of this. And if we look at the last slide, number 17, you can see the rocket booster again of the Jaffa drone. And that is the resistance report for day 713 of Israel's genocidal war on Gaza.